You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
For those of you listeners who know my background a bit, you might remember the stories of my first few jobs after college. From being a mall cop to selling makeup door to door, I realized that I had skills that were being underutilized and that these minimum wage jobs couldn't support me or last forever. I spent years going through YouTube, reading books, listening to podcasts, and taking enough online courses to reinvent myself as a professional copywriter and digital marketer. Years later, thanks to my side hustles and drive, I've worked with national news outlets, multi-million-dollar tech startups, nonprofits, and celebrities to build their brands and drive sales. None of this could have happened if I didn't develop in-demand skills. I had to do this alone, but you don't have to. You have Hustlers University 2.0. Hustlers University 2.0 is a community where you can learn real skills to earn money online today, starting with side hustles you can use to elevate your game. I'm not just an advocate for Hustlers University, I'm also a student. Every professor is verified to be making $10K to $500K monthly in their selected field. You get full resources, lesson plans, and an active community of thousands of other Hustlers University students working on skills such as stock analysis, cryptocurrencies, e-commerce, copywriting, which was my favorite course, one I actually went ahead and took last month. And as a copywriter of 7 years, I even took a ton out of that, including some of the resources I was able to take over to my day job. You also learn freelancing, financial planning, affiliate marketing, business management, and so much more. If you're tired of depending on a boss who hates you to deliver your paycheck, or have learned since the lockdowns that controlling the source of your income is vital to your individual freedom, sign up for Hustlers University 2.0 today using the link in the show notes. I'll see you there.
You dream of in your lifetime. You're listening to On the Run with Runzo W. Martinez.
Douglas, it's great to have you back on. A lot has changed in the past year and a half. I think it's been probably about 2 years since you came on, which sounds crazy, especially since we just passed episode 200. Of On the Run. So time is now, very much a social construct. I still feel like I'm in the first year, but so much has changed. And one of those things was that you left the Washington Times about a year ago now, and you went immediately into becoming a full-time comic writer. And this is something that you had wanted to have done for a while, but, thinking about it and actually taking the plunge to do it is what separates the boys from the men. So let's just go ahead and rewind it and catch up a little bit. When you were like, I'm actually going to commit my full time and resources to putting out great books, when did it actually start feeling real?
So first, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it. And yeah, time has flown by. It's been basically 5 years since I started meeting the people that ultimately would lead to the creation of Soulfinder and Iconic Comics. So it's just been like a blur. So that's weird. But really what happened was Soulfinder, the Indiegogo campaign, did very well. We only had it was only open to domestic backers. There were some people that I allowed to kind of sneak in the cracks with just like contributions, but we didn't have international open to anyone. So it did really well. It made $33,000 officially with domestic, and then there was the overseas stuff. And then afterwards, I saw the response to it, and then orders continued to come in. And then I would randomly see people review it 6 months, 7 months after the fact. And I was like, whoa, this has legs to it. Like a lot of campaigns, you see them, they launch, maybe the people eventually get the books, and you never really hear about it again. But I kept seeing people reviewing it, and then they would ask me okay, well, can I still get this? Yes, you can. And I was like, I think if I just go directly to Iconic Comics with this second book, if I could retain a certain number of readers, I could do this perpetually. As long as I don't break my trust with the readers, I might be able to continue to grow this and break outside YouTube and break outside Twitter and find other networks out there that are interested in this particular series. And so with the Washington Times, it was one of those things where there was a lot of other factors that were pushing me towards leaving. And I was like, you know what? I think now is the time. I want to, like you said, devote my full energies to this and see what happens.
It's amazing time to be alive right now for many, like, obvious reasons. But some of the good things is that a lot of stuff that, would have probably taken a few more years to progress has now just become a staple for many people. And when we look at the e-commerce space, like tens of billions of dollars were put into online sales during the pandemic and everything else. And that hasn't necessarily stopped. If anything, it's continued to grow the last couple of years. But what's really been fascinating is that I've been a fan of the crowdfunding model since before it really had a term. I remember for my second book, that was entirely crowdfunded. It was the first time I really did a massive project where I really didn't have to put much of my own capital into it. And now it seems that everybody has gone beyond just, like the GoFundMe days of, just give me like $10 here and there and you'll feel good about yourself, to I can actually build products and stuff that can go directly to the consumer and they get more out of it. I get what I need out of it. It's an amazing thing. Has that part changed going forward, since now you're doing more with Iconic Comics? Like, are people still going to be able to jump in the future Indiegogo campaigns, or is it going to be directly from the site from now on?
Yeah, so that's another thing, is there are people that are really into just the crowdfunding stuff. And if you go away from that, it's a bizarre situation where they almost are offended that you're leaving crowdfunding. Where in my mind, I'm like, well, if you get successful enough, you want to not ask other people for money first. I'm not opposed to it per se, but depending on what your goals are for the project. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, in the future, I'm not opposed to Indiegogo or Kickstarter or anything like that. There's a summer crossover event with my friend Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini. They have their own series, Common America Black Hops. And so that's going to be crowdfunding. That'll be on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and I'm part of that. That
series is so funny. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just picked up Common America Volume 1 a few weeks ago, and I've already ordered Black Hops and a few others, and they are just so funny.
Yeah, well, it was definitely a blessing to be able to meet Tim and have things work out where he was interested in doing the Soulfinder series. But yeah, going back to the crowdfunding thing, I'm not opposed to it. In fact, next year we have a book that's going to come out, which will be the Vietnam origins of one of my characters, Father Reginald Crane. And I plan on most likely going to Indiegogo or Kickstarter or both for that particular book, because the main character in my series is a priest named Father Patrick Redder. And this is like, he's also a big character, but it's his own sort of world. So I'm like, okay, for launching off in his own world, I'll do that one crowdfund and we'll see how that goes. But I don't necessarily need to do it, but hardcovers, anytime you get into hardcover books and you want to do things like that, it gets really pricey. And the risk goes up, obviously, the more money that you are sinking into these projects. So if I could find some happy balance between doing the crowdfunds and just funding them myself, I think that'll work out well in the long run.
As a creator, even with your partnership with Iconic Comics, like, you still own the rights to all your characters and stuff, right? So when you want to go off and do a crowdfunding campaign and stuff like this, that's not going to impact anything else you're doing.
Correct. So yeah, I retain all the rights to it. They're just doing the fulfillment. Everybody's under the Iconic Comics roof, but they don't own the properties. So if for whatever reason I decided tomorrow not to do Volume 3 through them, I can do that. Do I want to? No. But if I did, they would be like, okay, that's cool. Like, doors open if you want to come back, that sort of thing. So it's really just, we have a good working relationship and balancing that sort of like friends and business at the same time. I know that's a minefield for a lot of people, but I think we've done a pretty good job doing that over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are really kind of fulfilling that old school Image Comics dream, which is, what if we just gave writers and artists kind of like the platform to kind of get their stuff out to readers, and they could still be in charge of how they want to kind of do their own studios and how they want to manage their own books or anything. And I think right now we're in a bit of a renaissance, because, you know, post lockdowns and everything else, the distribution channels for like the big two, for example, Marvel and DC, like they're still probably months and months behind from where they wanted to be. And with a lot of local comic shops here in the Milwaukee area, like, you know, ever since like DC cut off from Diamond and went with a couple different printers, like they don't know if they're ever getting the books that they order on time, and that impacts their customer relationship and everything else. So, I mean, it's been an amazing time for a lot of indie books to come up. I mean, I didn't know who Chip Zdarsky was, and now he's a bigger writer and everything. But he started off writing indie titles over at, you know, Image, Dark Horse, other stuff. And you have a lot of indie books that, you know, people are really jumping towards, because one, with all the weirdness that's been going on between Marvel and DC, that was already pushing away readers for years. But now it's gotten to the point where it's like, you know, it's almost like craft beer and stuff like that. It's like people want to find something really unique, something really cool. They want to say that they're supporting small publishers and writers. And it seems like kind of a renaissance period. Have you kind of experienced that from, you know, new readers and people who were kind of disenfranchised, who were like, listen, I want something fresh. I want something genuinely good. And, you know, this seems like a good deal.
Yeah, I think the sort of microbrewery sort of beer analogy, or whatever you want to call it, is actually a pretty good one. There are people out there that love iconic comics. They collect everything. They share, you know, all their books online and social media. And it's really this sort of grassroots effort, because we have no mainstream support whatsoever. You're not going to see the mainstream comic book websites. They don't pay attention to iconic comics at all. And obviously the Marvel DC, they're not knocking on our doors or whatever. And so all of the growth has been this organic thing from the ground up of people that were disillusioned by whatever the heck's going on in comics these days. And they were looking for something different. Some people that wanted solid storytelling and solid art, and they wanted it at a fair price. And so they're finding it at Iconic Comics, and obviously various crowdfunding campaigns where the creators are reliable and consistent and put out good work.
Now, since you're doing this full time now, has your relationship with the book kind of changed? It's kind of like, you know, when some people go from having something that was just a passion project, just a hobby, to now it's, you know, something that's kind of like, you know, keeping them afloat, paying the bills. The relationship kind of changes. Has that happened since you transitioned?
Not so much. It's one of those things where my biggest problem is wrestling with myself in doing research on different stories that I want to tell, because you could read books until the cows come home, like over and over and over and over. So when do you cut off the research that you're doing? So for the book I'm doing next year, I've been researching Vietnam. I've been researching the tunnel rats and all of that. At some point in time, you have to cut it off and just write the script and do that. So I've been struggling with that because I like to read and I could just read all day. I could read for 8 hours a day and I'd be happy. So I can't do that. I got to write the scripts. And then the other thing is, I've been cautiously wading into the waters where you don't want to do, okay, it's like I've done one book a year and I've been happy with that. I'm confident that I could put this out into the world and put my name behind it. But I don't want to, the logistics involved in getting books together and getting them published and getting nice hardcovers out to people and all of that. There's a lot of moving parts, and I'm scared that if I started writing 2 and 3 books a year, I could write the scripts, but then the fulfillment process and the distribution, I don't want to drop the ball on that. So I've been a little nervous in that respect.
So maybe you can explain something to me, because, and for people that aren't familiar with your work, you're not putting out like a 23-page individual comic book once a year. You're putting together a full length graphic novel between like, was it like 40 to 60 pages?
Right. So the first two books were 56-page stories that had 8 pages of bonus art. This third book is 72 pages.
Oh, wow.
And it has 12, and then it has a 12-page short story that I was simultaneously working on called War Cry. It takes place at Arlington Cemetery. And then there's a couple other pages for end sheets and the books and all of that. So essentially, we'll just say 90 pages are going into this current project right now. And yeah, anytime you're doing more than just a single issue floppy comic book, the bigger it gets, then there's all sorts of costs involved. And then you have to juggle getting the inking done and the lettering done and the color work. All of that, you're adding more people to the list every time. If you want to do gilded pages and they don't have the correct, or certain inks. If you do glow in the dark, they got to order the specialty glow in the dark ink and all of this, and they got to do it 2 months ahead, or there's a cardboard shortage and you might not be able to do the hardcovers unless you get your proofs in by this date. If you don't, you're going to be waiting 4 months. So like I said, you're juggling all of these things. You're like the guy in the variety show with the plates, trying to keep them all spinning simultaneously. And if I start doing 2 and 3 books a year, I think all my plates are going to crash to the ground if I don't. I need to practice, I guess is what I'm saying.
Is the goal to eventually go to making this or something else a monthly book?
Not for me, no. I don't think I could ever do a monthly book. Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini, they have their webtoons, and I think those come out every Wednesday, the Common America stuff. But Tim, so as a writer, I'm at a disadvantage because I need to go out and I need to find artists who could bring the script to life. Whereas Tim, he could do all of his color work. He does, he is the artist. So if he wants to stay up from midnight until 8 a.m. drawing, he can do that, and he could get it out at a much faster clip. Whereas I'm out there finding artists like Jeff Spokes or Alejandro Mirabal, or bugging my buddy Eric Canetti to do a cover for me and saying like, hey man, I know you're busy. Can you squeeze this in? And you've been kind enough to do that.
Well, what I do like about the way that you and the other folks at Iconic Comics do it is like, when I picked up Soulfinder the first time for the first volume, like it was a complete story. It's right there. And there's something about getting a complete story. I think this is why, like Marvel, for example, they've really drifted more towards doing a lot more original graphic novel content. And a few writers are going on their own to kind of do that. I know that Chuck Dixon has also kind of done that in the past since he stopped doing a lot of stuff with the DC after Bane Conquest about 4 or 5 years ago. But like I think there's something better about getting a concise story, because what you also see is that the quality of everything is also just different. It's at a different level. Like there are monthly titles, and I haven't collected monthly titles in over 4 or 5 months now. I had a couple that I was grabbing, but it was more because I needed to like fix my comic book craving for a little bit. And now it's like, it's like one issue's really, really good, and then the other one is kind of sloppy. And you can kind of tell that, especially since, writers and artists were told to like put down their pencils for like 7 months. There's like this weird catch up period, but I can't give them that much leniency because the quality in a lot of books over the last couple of years, like it was waning even before that, because editors were just trying to bring in people that weren't necessarily qualified, or, they might have a Twitter blue check mark, but they're not necessarily great artists, or they're not necessarily great writers. So they're just hoping that they can get their stuff in on time. Whereas when I go ahead and pick up a complete volume of any of the titles from Iconic Comics, the standard of the writing is going to be good, and it's going to be consistent throughout the story. A lot more emphasis has been placed on the quality of the artwork. It's like you guys have a completely different level, not only compared to other indie publishers, but also just in terms of comics in general.
Yeah, the sort of long-term goal is to be able to put out books where if you held up an Iconic Comics book next to a Marvel book, the Iconic book would either compete with the best of the Marvel books or even exceed the overall quality and price point. And so that was something early on I talked with Timothy Lim about, and we were like, how do we, the distribution problem, getting that's really expensive. Okay, now how do we figure out this international? That's one we're still working on, the international problem, because it's so expensive to ship overseas. And how do you keep the quality up and get those to people and all of that? So it's, like I said, time has flown by. It's been 5 years, but I think in the short amount of time that Iconic Comics has existed, it's shown that it's punching above its weight class. And if we keep doing what we're doing, I just think a lot of cool things are just over the horizon.
There's something that, at least for me as a buyer, I've noticed about my own trends. It's like over the last 4 or 5 years now, I tend to follow specific writers. Like I wasn't necessarily following, like Donny Cates to Thor because I really loved Thor. It's because I like the quality of his writing and stuff like that. And even some people who I almost hesitate to bring up now because they've really kind of butchered the books that they're currently doing. Like I consider myself a pretty big Tom Taylor fan, but ever since I picked up Superman, Son of Kal-El issue 1, I've just been like, what have you done? Like, what have you done? So now I still kind of do that. I still kind of follow a few writers or a few artists, but I'm not necessarily married to the idea of supporting a specific book or a specific publisher at this point. And I was kind of like that way with you because your Soulfinder series was really the only one I was buying from Iconic Comics. And then, about a month ago, I went ahead and bought Common America, Stars and Strife Volume 1, which is fantastic. And now I found myself with like this credit card bill. It's like, wow, I think I kind of went on a binge streak buying a whole bunch more. And it's like, it's really great when you see a stable of writers and artists that are lifting up each other's quality, that are helping cross promote each other's books. And you're seeing like a really good, stable team of professionals that are saying, whether you like this style of story or this style of story, we all have different flavors, but we still hold ourselves to the same level of quality. And that's not something I've felt from Marvel for at least a decade. DC, probably like the past 5-6 years.
So last year we were at Bell County Comic-Con in Texas. There was over 32,000 people there. And we didn't just have a booth. We had essentially a square. And each side of the square had, it was, I was there, and then next to me was Alejandro Mirabal. He had the Long Harbor book. And then next to him was Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini. They had their stuff. Then next to them was Matt Weldon and Bill Williams. They had their Punchline book. And then next to them was George Alexopoulos. It was like George and I were sort of like together or whatever. But it was this thing where you're talking about raising other people up. Alejandro Mirabal would have someone come to him and they would, wow, I really like this. This is like really cool. And he's like, well, if you like this, then you'll probably like Doug's Black Tide book. So you might want to check that out. And then vice versa. They would come to me and they're like, oh, this is pretty cool, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you like this art, then you go to the other side of the square because Timothy Lim did the Common America books and he's over there. And so our entire table did it really well in terms of sales because we were constantly sending customers over to somebody else. And we were able to almost like break the ice for the next guy by saying like, hey, no, if you like what I'm doing, you're going to like this guy. And it just sort of had this domino effect, this positive domino effect. And that carries over, I think, to the online social media stuff with everybody sort of sharing each other's work and vouching for each other in terms of the overall quality of the books. But it all hinges on the book actually being good. You don't want them to buy the book and they're like, hey, he was giving me a line there. It's like, no, I really do believe that these books and that the people that are under the Iconic roof are putting out quality material.
And speaking of the internet culture around it, which is primarily on Twitter, we've already talked about how the industry has been changing and continues to go through changes. One of the things that really bugs me is when I go to my local comic shops here, and there are a few I just stopped going to because of, to be quite honest, like the mask mandates here in Milwaukee have been done for like a year now. and they're still forcing people to do that. That's a whole other thing. So it's like, I'm not, as much as I want to support a small business, there are other small comic shops around here I can give my money to. I don't have to give them to you, but it's like, well, in that store's case, it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot because they don't get their stuff in on time. They don't put it out on the shelves on time. They're sloppy with how they manage their pull boxes and everything. But like, this seems like a perfect opportunity for indie publishers and indie titles to really kind of fill that void. But at the same time, we had like a massacre in terms of the number of comic shops that permanently closed down. I think there were around like 4,000 or 5,000 in the United States. And since 2020, around 1,700 or so have permanently closed down. So it seems like a great opportunity to get on shelves. Are you guys distributing to local comic shops? Is it just like a store by store thing? Is it a regional thing? Is that even a priority, or do you just still place an emphasis on direct to consumer?
So Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini have worked with Antarctic Press for a while, and I actually think the Punchline books with Matt Weldon and Bill Williams, I'm not 100% sure on that. I think they've worked with Antarctic Press, whereas a lot of times these books, they'll come out and then there's essentially, I don't know all of their business dealings, but sometime after the fact, those books will work their way into comic shops under Antarctic Press. And so they have done that. I've been approached to do that sort of thing by individuals. But for right now, it's like it's a nice feather in your cap to be like, oh, I got in a comic book shop or whatnot. But right now, I'm just happy kind of doing it the way that I'm doing. And it's just an extra thing that I would have to get involved in and do the paperwork. And there's like legal things involved. And it's just like, it's really not worth it to me to get into like a few dozen comic book stores for the amount of effort that I have to put into it. At least for right now, I want to just concentrate on getting the next book out. So, but I'm open to it. But like you said, a lot of comic book shops do weird things and they shoot themselves in the foot. And these days, actually, most of the comic book shops that I go to have turned more into Funko Pop T-shirt shops that also happen to sell Batman and Spider-Man.
I have such a weird relationship with that because at the same time, it's like you look around the shop and you're like, I know who's here for comic books and who's not. But at the same time, it's like a majority of stores are starting to sell that. The Amazing Comic Shop in Fairfax, Virginia, was like my stomping ground. I used to go to that store so much over the last decade that I almost thought about just having my mail sent there. But I remember one summer coming back from some army training, I walked in and they did like a complete revamp of the store layout. And it was all Funko Pops. It was all statues, T-shirts, collectible junk and stuff like that, which some people like. I don't want to, diminish their hobbies, but like all the comics were pushed to the sidewall. So then it was like, you're still a comic shop, and like I get it, but it's also like when the lockdowns and everything happened, it's like those people weren't coming to your shop to buy Funko Pops. The people that were keeping you alive were comic book readers. And I almost like, I think it's going to be a sad day because people have been talking about this way prior to that and everything. They were like, when are comic book shops going to be extinct, or will they just evolve into being more of like, a pop culture collectible store that also sells comic books? I'm kind of in this weird situation because as much as I love the nostalgia of going to a comic book store, it's almost like, that a certain part of the culture has changed to a point where it's like it's no longer relevant to my fan experience of getting to go there and do it, especially with how the publishers have treated a lot of comic book shops. They've treated them and the people that go there, they've treated them like they're toxic. They're bad for fandom because they want to replace them with people who just want the Funko Pops of their characters and don't know shit beyond that. And then it's like, it just doesn't feel the same. Like as much as I still enjoy going there, even if it's just a window shop, which itself is a lie because I've never walked into a comic book shop without walking out with something.
Right.
It feels different. And if they went away tomorrow, I would be sad, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like they already went away a while ago.
Yeah, I think on some level it would be like vinyl records, where at some point in time they were not popular, CDs and all of this. And then a lot of places stopped making vinyl records. But then you had someone like a Third Man Records and a Jack White, who I'm like a huge fan of. I admit that. Like, I like what he's doing in Detroit with, like, he started building all the infrastructure to be able to sell vinyl and have like cool artists put out vinyl. Now there's this sort of like resurgence in vinyl. And I think comic books could sort of be the same way. And on some bizarre level, in terms of iconic comics, I would like iconic comics to almost be like the Third Man Records of comics or something along those lines. I haven't really unpacked it all, but I've been really looking into Third Man Records lately and thinking about them and thinking about what they do and how they do it and how they literally have their own factory printing vinyl. And so if iconic comics at some point in time could be able to just literally print their own books and print their own hardcovers, I think that would be pretty cool. That might be like a 5-year plan.
I mean, there's still a strength to owning a brick and mortar location, because I mean, let's play in the realm of theory here. You guys start doing all your own in-house printing and everything, and you own like one physical location. It's not just a place where you sell your stuff. It's where you host, panels and author signings and artist signings and screenings. And you could do so much of that, grow the community, create more engagement. In 2020, I was very serious. I worked with a partner at the time who did venture capital startups for small businesses. I wanted to start a comic book coffee shop in Manassas, Virginia. And I was very serious. I was already putting out the research. I was already looking at locations, seeing what the difference between, whether I want to buy a location or rent a location or what have you. Like I was very serious, but the idea was, it's like my passion is comics, but I wanted to bring coffee into it, because what I realized was that comic book shops don't really make a lot of profit off the comics.
Right.
Whereas a coffee shop, you can bring in people who want one or the other. And if you're selling coffee for, even a slight markup, if I just bought wholesale large, back issue collections of comic books, and I put them in the back and I put them all up for like a $3 markup or something, the coffee can keep the bills paid, but the comics could go ahead and actually like bring in the profit, because you get a mom who comes in and her kids want to buy books. So she's drinking coffee, looking at her phone, and her kid's coming over with a stack of comics. She's like, bam, I've just made that kid a convert for life. I'm fixing a childhood illiteracy one day at a time. But it's like, as I started thinking about that, and when the pandemic and everything happened, it's like, I can't do that now, but it's almost like if I was thinking about that, I hope that maybe some comic shops have started to realize, and maybe even some of the publishers, it's like, this has to evolve if it wants to stay relevant. And even if the comics aren't the draw, the comics can still be something that kind of ties everything together in one way, shape, or form.
Right. No, I think that's a really good idea. I was telling someone on Twitter recently that years ago, I would go to the comic shop and then I would get my comics, and then I would go to Panera Bread and I would find my little corner of Panera, get my food, open my comics, and spend like the next hour reading comics. And then, I would alternate between that and checking Twitter or something like that.
That was me and Dunkin' Donuts. I go to the Amazing Comic Shop after school, and then I go to Dunkin' Donuts and get my coffee and read my books there.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good idea. And I honestly, I don't know why more comic shops don't do something along those lines. There's a YouTuber, Gary from Nerdrotic, and I was like messing with him recently. I was just like, hey, when are you going to have the diner / sort of comic shop or something along those lines? And I just think that's a good mix of people that want to just chill out and have their coffee or have their tea or hot chocolate and lay back and just read some comics for a little while.
I did some competitive analysis. I have to throw out the buzzwords so people know I was actually serious about it. I did some competitive analysis, and what I found is that like it's not something that hadn't been done before. There was one in Baltimore, and there's one that is still around in Philadelphia, and I think there's one in San Francisco or San Diego, but there's very few of them. And these are the ones that have been around for like more than 5 years, so they're functional. But the problem is that you had a lot of these store owners that were starting to serve coffee, but the coffee was more of a gimmick. Like They were basically just using a Keurig, and the coffee wasn't that good. And they were basically trying to do that because they were like, come in and get my comics. And then you have some stores where it's like, it's a coffee shop. It looks like a Starbucks, and they sell comics, except it's like a rack with some manga on it.
Right.
And it's like, I kind of understand why one does the other, but it's like, I had to kind of understand that. It's like, is the intention, at least for me, was the intention to create a comic book store that sells coffee, knowing that the comics will not bring people in really, and the comics will not make a profit? Or am I a coffee shop that sells comic books? And when I was doing it, I was like, I have to focus on what keeps it sustaining. It's a coffee shop that sells comic books.
Right.
So it's like, if I had done that, and maybe one day I'll still go through with it if I have enough capital, and, depending on how the economy keeps going, maybe not. But it's like the stores that were like, let's go ahead and double down on the coffee, we could do that. But then I'm thinking, it's like, well, why stop at coffee? Why not have like, a villain's cafe, like a Mos Eisley cantina type thing, like the Scum and Villainy Cantina in Los Angeles? Like, why not go ahead and have a bar that sells comic books, because alcohol brings in more profit than coffee, or stuff like that. It's like, it's almost like you have to find something to fuel the passion.
Yeah. There are so few entrepreneurs that, want to go out, and they have that love for both comics and the culinary side of it, I guess, and then putting them together.
It's a weird combination, but somehow it makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And then you're like, oh, well, even if that entrepreneur exists, not only do they have to be able to raise the capital and have the organizational skills and the management skills, so it's like, then it's the execution of that. And I just think, yeah, there are very few people even in a population of, what is it, like 300 million Americans or whatever, like that would be able to pull it off. But I do think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Just somebody, it always comes down to just time or money. It's like, there was a moment where it was like, I had the time. And then after that, it was like, well, now I have more time, and now I have money. And now it's like, well, now I've just got no time. And it's like, I wish somebody would take the plunge, and I hate saying that because it sounds like a cop out. It's always like, you always get like the Grant Cardones of the world. Why don't you do it? And it's like, I'm not making excuses. It's just a matter of like, I'm surprised that a non-comic shop owner, especially right now, hasn't gotten to the point where it's like, this is a do or die situation.
Right.
Because, like last year, 2021, they saw record sales of print comics, not even counting digital. Digital has been kind of, flat for a while in terms of the number of people that are buying. They're not getting a lot of new discoveries through digital like they thought they would. They sold more comics in 2021 than they sold in 2018, according to Comic Book Resources. So it's like, that you have a good opportunity where you're starting to resuscitate yourself. There are 5 comic shops in and around me here in the Milwaukee area. If just one of them opened a coffee shop component or a diner or a bar, that would be my new spot just by default.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's if you could find the right person who could, like you said, they do the coffee, but the coffee is actually good. Or if it's a little diner and they have 1 or 2 menu items that are just really good. Like I said, I would go to Panera or whatever, and I'd get my weekly panini that I loved. It's like you have something that will draw people in. They're going to come to it. It's what is it? If you build it, they will come sort of thing.
Field of Dreams. Well, Douglas, it's been great having you on so far. Let's just kind of wrap up with this. As you kind of look out to the next couple of years, what are just your pie in the sky dreams? Like, you've got to have some. Are you thinking maybe make this into a digital, series, like live action or something? Or are you thinking of animation? Or are you thinking of, radio drama versions of the books? Like, is the goal just to keep going and because that's just what you want to do? I mean, where's your mind taking you?
Yeah, Tim was telling me the other day, I don't think he would mind me saying this, that he was talking to the owner of Iconic, and the owner was saying, the thing I like about you guys is if you just came into $1 million tomorrow, you would still do Soulfinder. Like literally nothing would change. It's not like you would be like, well, see you later. You'd be like, no, I want to find a way to put that $1 million into an animated Soulfinder or something along those lines. So in terms of the long-term stuff, there are some things that we are working on that I can't really talk about, but we even this fall, there's something that might come out this fall that I think is going to be pretty cool for a lot of people. But I think animation would be something that I would really like to get into. And then there are other properties that I have. There's 2 other properties that I would like to develop. But right now it's I'm focused on getting the 4th Soulfinder script written and then starting that. And then maybe I'll start the second IP in a couple months here, but we got a show down and that's the other thing is we started doing shows. So I'm going down to Texas multiple times this year. I think I might be going to North Carolina, might be going to Kansas City, and then going back to Mobile, Alabama, I believe this December. So between all the travel and the shows and just doing the Soulfinder stuff, it's like, where do you make that time? But I'm trying my best.
Yeah. And you're a one-man army for sure. Dude, if people want to go ahead and follow you on Twitter, pick up your books and everything else, how could they do so?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Douglas Ernst on all of them is basically my handle. If you search me, you could find me. If people want to buy books directly, they could just go to Douglas Ernst at douglasernst.blog. And then obviously iconicomics.com has both volumes of Soulfinder out. It will soon have the 3rd volume, and it will also have the short story in the near future called Soulfinder Warcry.
Dude, the artwork that you were sending me on Twitter that no one else has been able to see so far. Like, my God, you have upped your game. Like the artist that you teamed up with and everything, like this book looks freaking crazy.
I was hoping to just pack this next book because this is the book that's the first book since I left the newspaper. So it's like, okay, now he had time on his hands. What did he do with this time? So it's like, all right, I'm going to give you Dave Dorman, Matt Weldon, Jeff Spokes, Alejandro Mirabal, Eric Canetti, and I'm just going to bash all of this cool artwork into one hardcover book. And then hopefully it's on me in the writing. It's hopefully I did my job with the storytelling part.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. Always a blast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Folks, if you want to go ahead and hear more conversations like this, do me a favor. Go ahead and leave me a 5-star rating and review across Al Gore's amazing internet, wherever you listen to podcasts. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. We can go ahead and keep you going. As always, go ahead and find all the shows and more over at wearelibertarians.com, and we'll be back later in the week. Be safe. Be good. Good night.